Thank you for attending our last session for the Cloud Security Essentials training course. Today, we will cover our last module in the course. Before going direct to the last module, let's go through the other modules which we covered in the last few sessions. First module, we covered the architecture and the concepts and the design requirements for the cloud computing and hosting. And of course, it's very important before going to the cloud hosting or cloud service provider evaluation or whatever any activities related to the cloud service providers, it's very important to understand the security concepts in general and the security concepts related to the cloud computing as well. It will be a good approach also to have some idea about the architecture frameworks like TOGAF, like SAPSA. It will be very helpful to understand how you can approach the cloud service provider and you can evaluate his infrastructure and understand the hosting environment which he will provide to your organization. The second module, we covered the cloud data security, and we mentioned that security here is very important because in the cloud data we have multi-tenancy, and this will be very important to highlight the data security by isolation, by encryption, by access control. There are a lot of methods which we covered some of them during the explanation of module number 2. In module number 3, the cloud infrastructure security, as we mentioned, there are some standards which consider that the application and data, it will not be secure unless the infrastructure, it will be secure. And this, it will cover the physical security for the data centers, for the hosting, for the cabinets, for the power, for the facilities in general, for the data center, for the network, even the internal network inside the cloud service provider site, or the external network which allow the user to connect to the cloud service provider to access the data and services. The module number 4, which we covered also for the cloud application security, it was one of the important topics because it will highlight the security of application, which unfortunately a lot of people, they are not aware about it, because unfortunately the developers are not security specialists. When we start the development of application security, it's not in their mind. And security, it will come in the last phase during the implementation, and usually we have to make it as supplementary security. We have to add a firewall, we have to add XML firewall or appliance or sandboxing or whatever the solution which it will provide the security for the application. But if we are understanding the concept of application security, then we can provide a lot of security features in the application itself, which it will be very helpful and useful to protect the application, and consequently it will protect the data which it's hosted and manipulated by the application. Finally, we will have the security operations, and it will be our module for today. This module, it's very important, and from my point of view, I consider that the security operations is the backbone for the security model success. Because as we explained before, you may have some security controls, or you may have some security solutions which it costs the organizations maybe millions of US dollars. But if the operations team are not able to read the logs and discover what is going on your network. And if there is any attacks on the network, or if there is any malicious users, he is trying to access some services which he is not authorized to access, even if it's internal or external access. All this information, it will be very important. You have to follow up your network. You have to understand the logs. You must have some solution, which is security identification and events management. This it will be very helpful, where you can collect all the logs from your applications, services, operating systems, desktops, and the network. And this information, it will be used as correlation information to discover any attacks. When this way that the security team, they are the core of the success of any operations and network security model. In module number 5, we will cover some of these topics. And let's start by the topic number 1 for planning process for data center design. In the data center design, we will have multiple concepts. We'll have the physical design, and of course, all these designs, it should be handled by the operations teams, because we are the owner of the data center, and this is considered, I will not say the second home for operations teams. This is the first home. They are spending time in the data centers more than the time which they spend in their home. First of all, we have to start with the physical design, because this is design which we have to start with. This, it will include the networks, it will include the hosts, which in other words, servers, storage, cabinets, whatever any other devices which are required for the operation. For example, link load balancer, any hardware device, or application services, and so on. After we prepare the data center with the physical equipments and everything, it's installed in the cabinets and it's ready for working, we have to implement our design for the logical implementation, because actually the physical design does not mean that you have, for example, suppose that you have 100 hosts, you put 100 server from your partner or from your vendor. Do you think that by the end of the day in this data center, it will host 100 servers? Actually, of course not, because these servers, it will be utilized and used by virtualization, and each host, it may be split or host, say, 100 VMs. Then by the end of the day, you will find that these hosts are transferred into 1,000 or maybe more VMs on your network. When the physical design, it is the 100 server, but the logical design, it's the virtual VMs, which are 1,000 servers. This is the difference between the physical and the logical design. Also, the other thing which you have to keep in your mind, in the operations, it is the storage. The storage, by the end of the day, you may have 2 or 3 or 4 storage. It depends upon the size of the data which you expect that it will be hosted by your customers. But by the end of the day, you have to split this storage into parts, or whatever we call it. Frankly speaking, I cannot remember the term right now, but anyway, these parts, it will be defined for the VMs, and the VMs, it will be able to see this storage as part of its physical infrastructure, as it is hosted in the server itself. Okay, this, of course, which it's considered as SAN implementation. Again, it's very important to keep in your mind the environmental design. What is the environmental design? Environmental design is which it will care about the environment of the data center. For example, the power, as we mentioned in the infrastructure, you must have redundancy, power, internal and external. For AC, it's very important because if your AC temperature it's not adequate for the number of the hosts which are hosted in the data center, then this means that the machines it can be burned, or in the best situations it may be stopped because it protects itself, then it will terminate the operations because it reached to a temperature which it will not be able to accommodate. Also, it's very important to keep in your mind the humidity control, because humidity control is very important. If you have dry air in the data center more than the required values, then this it can cause the static electricity, which it can burn some electronic components of the hosted device. And if you have the humidity, it's higher than the required value, then this it will represent again another problem for the devices, and this again it will affect the performance and operations of the data centers. When these are the planning processes which you have to take it in your consideration when you make the design of the data center. First of all, you have to think about the location. Then you have to think about, of course, the location, I mean, of the data center. You have to think about the environment design of the data center, including power, AC, humidity, fire alarm, and so on. Then physical design, the number of servers, the hosts, the machines, hardware and software, and so on. And finally, you have to go through the logical design of the data center. In the logical design, we have multiple components which we have to take it in our consideration when we will make the design. Number one, virtualization, which we discussed a few minutes ago. Number two, it will be the multi-tenancy, and as if you can remember from our previous sessions, we mentioned that multi-tenancy is considered as a characteristics, one of the characteristics of the cloud service provider, and it provides the access for multiple users on the same physical host because it's split into logical VMs. And this is very important. Although it would provide the capabilities of the cloud service provider to share resources, but don't forget that this it will provide that you have multiple machines. You have multiple machines running on the same host, and this it can be a point of weakness because some users can see the information or the data of other users. When we have to take in our consideration the isolation. Isolation here is very important. This isolation it can be through the encryption or access control as mentioned here. And the access control, this again, it's another important issue which you have to take it in your consideration. And the access control, which you can think about it, it's the IAAA, which is identity, identification, authentication, and identification, authentication, authorization, and accounting. These are very important information which you have to take it in your consideration because the user, he must be authenticated properly. He can use whatever, any factor of the authentication, something you know, something you are, something you have, or if it's accessing a critical application, then you can use 2FA, or if he is accessing a privileged user, again, he can use a multiple factor authentication or 2FA. API, this application broker interface, it's very important topic, and we discussed this in details during the explanation of the application security. Because the API, this is the interface. This is the interface which you will, it will provide you the services for the cloud service provider. In other words, cloud service providers, they will provide you the services, the applications, the management of the infrastructure, or whatever any service they will provide through the API. To make it clear, just imagine if you want to have Office 365 on your machine, what's you require? Only what you require is the browser. But actually, Office, it's not running on a browser. Office, it's a client-based application. You have to get the CD or you have to download the application, then you have to install it, then you will find the icon for the Word or Excel or PowerPoint or whatever. You have to click on it, then you can open it. But now what we are saying that you have to open a browser. When this means that there is API, application program interface, coming in between, which it will change this application, which is considered as a client application, to a browser application. This is API. This is the interface of the API. Okay. Do you have any questions?
No, Sama.
Okay, great. The second thing which we have to speak about it is the environment design, and I think we covered temperature, humidity. These are important components for the data center. Okay, the next module which we want to discuss, it will be the physical and logical infrastructure for the cloud environment. The physical and logical infrastructure, you have, first of all, configuration of access control for local and remote access. Of course, this it will be from point of view of the cloud service provider himself, because if you want to access the infrastructure, he will need the KVM, keyboard, video, and mouse device, which is considered as a terminal. It consists of a monitor, keyboard, and mouse. And this terminal, it will be connected to all the hosts. And you will have a button which you can choose that you can manage first server, second server, third server. The number of servers depends upon the model of the KVM itself. Of course, this KVM must be secure. This KVM must not allow any data exchange through this device. When there is no data, it can be transferred from one server to another. This it will be a very critical component. Also, you must have a console-based access mechanisms. In the console, what do we mean by console access? Console access, this is specific interface, physical interface. It will be built in any hardware device. In any hardware device, you will find this console-based access. This console-based, it's an interface where you have to connect your cable. It may be RS-232 serial cable, and you have to connect this serial cable to your PC and run a terminal software. Then it will provide you the interface of the configuration of the device itself. And in some situation, it may provide you a GUI, graphical user interface, for the management. This is very, very, very important and dangerous. Why? Because just imagine if these devices are there is an access by hacker for these devices. This means that he can make a lot of changes on the devices. He can able to get the configuration. From this configuration, he can understand the blueprint of the network and so on. Then these console-based access mechanisms, you must first of all access the console-based from inside the data center. Don't allow any physical access to these ports from outside, even through VPN. It's highly recommended to have it through a data center site itself. This one of the important issue which you have to think about it and to create. For example, you can have 2FA authentication for it. For example, as we mentioned, it's very critical when you can configure the 2FA authentication to access the console based ports. Also, we have the remote desktop protocol. The remote desktop protocol, I am quite sure that you are familiar with it, which we call it RDP. This is a protocol of Microsoft, which allow you to access your server from any desktop when you will have the screen of managing and administrating the server. Although this RDP, it's not secure and there are a lot of bugs discovered, and I really recommend not to use it anymore. I know a lot of organizations, they disable this protocol totally from their infrastructure because it's not secure. It's still there, but as we mentioned, it's not secure and it's not recommended to use it anymore. Okay, secure network configuration, as we explained in the infrastructure, that the network configuration, we can utilize a lot of features or technologies to protect your secure network security. First of all, you can use the zones. You can use the zones. Of course, the most popular zones approach, it's using 3 zones for the internal access, external access, and the DMZ. And of course, this it will be distributed between 1 or 2 firewalls. Of course, 2 firewalls, it will be more secure and it will be better. Also, you can have multiple VLANs. You can have multiple VLANs, but of course, multiple VLANs, again, it's working on layer 2 and on the switches, as you know that there are a lot of techniques for hacker that they can have VLAN hopping. They can move from one VLAN to another VLAN, although it's on layer 2, but again, it's not so secure if we are utilizing the concept of the zones, and these zones, it will not be able to exchange traffic except if it's passing and inspected by firewall. It would be more secure and better. Also, we can utilize the feature of the TLS for encrypting the data. Then whatever any data, it will be exchanged over the network, it will be secure. It is very important also to protect the services running on the network, to protect your services running on the network as a DHCP, Dynamic Host Control Protocol, and I am quite sure that you heard about this service. This is the device which it will distribute IP addresses and TCP IP parameters automatically to the network devices. This service is very important because if there is any hacker, he was able to install a DHCP or Rouge DHCP in the server, and it was able to collect some network devices able to collect the IP address or this IP address from this Rouge DHCP. And this means that all your the communication, it will not be secure, and they will be able to communicate with the hackers' devices. DNS, of course, today the time it will not be enough to cover all the attacks from the DNS, but the DNS is a very important topic where the DNS device naming services, it's very important to know that there are a lot of attacks for the DNS as DNS poisoning, for example. Yani when you type www.microsoft.com, when if there is any hacker, he was able to access the DNS, then he can change the IP address from in the A record of the DNS from IP address of Microsoft into IP address of his server. When anyone he will type www.microsoft.com, then automatically it will be able to go to the hacker IP server, and he can capture data, he can capture credentials, and so on. To protect again the DNS, you can use the DNSSEC, and this it will make sure that whatever any data it's coming from the DNS, it's coming from the actual DNS or the authoritative DNS, which is hosting the domain name, not any other hacker DNS service. Finally, to protect your network, you can utilize the concept of the VPN, IPsec, for example, and you can encrypt your data. Any questions?
No, so far.
Okay. OS hardening and application of baselines. OS hardening, whatever your operating system, Windows, Linux, Unix, it's very important to consider the hardening of your operating systems. What are the steps of hardening your operating systems? Number one, you have to disable the default accounts. Number two, you have to disable whatever any default password on the operating systems, if any. I think now Windows, Linux, Unix, now we don't have any default passwords, but يعني, just keep it in your mind. Also, it's very important to disable whatever any services which are not required. Any services which are not required, disable it. There is no need to keep it because whatever any of the service it's available, it will have a backdoor. It may have sorry, it may have a backdoor. It may have some bugs which the hacker he can utilize it. And this it will create a risk for the operating system. Also, any programs which you don't need it, then please remove it. There is no need to keep these programs. And I know some of our colleagues, they have servers, okay, he wants to try something, then he will download a program and another program. And after he will finish all the tests, he will not remove any of these programs. All these programs, it can be considered as increasing the exposure of the risks for the attackers. The attacker, he will come and he will make a reconnaissance on the server. He will check if there is any ports are open. In some situations, this application, it may open some port like FTP or TFTP or whatever, any protocols which it can be used as a backdoor for the server's access. In the application-based lines, this very important concept. And I'm sure that you have the concept of the baseline. This baseline is the recommended configuration which you require for your server. This is the configuration which we consider it is the ultimate. Why? Now I got a server, I installed the server, I disabled the default accounts, I disabled the default passwords, I disabled and removed all unnecessary services and applications, and I installed all my security programs which I require. It may be firewall, it may be IBS or IDS, anti-malware, whitelisting application programs, and so on. I also installed all the patches which are required. When all these exercises consider the best practices for the security of my configuration. Then this is will consider the ultimate configuration which I need. I will take a baseline for it. This is considered my baseline. Then if there is any, and I'll take it as an image, of course, if there is any new server it's coming, then what I have to do to take this baseline and install it on the server. Then there is no need to repeat all these exercises every time, especially you know that when you are installing or leasing a server in a cloud service provider, you may have the VM, you don't have interaction with the cloud service provider to do this for you, but you have to tell him, please, I want Windows, I want Linux, I want whatever in your operating system. Then they have to keep these baselines, and these baselines will have all the applications required and even the security services. They may have some logging or syslog servers or syslog client to send data to SIM servers and so on. Then this it will be the baselines required to have it in your infrastructure. And it is highly recommended to have it as a baseline. Okay, Availability of stand-alone hosts. This is a very important concept in a cloud service providers in nowadays. Why? Although we agreed that in the cloud service provider, one of the characteristics or main characteristics of the cloud service provider is the virtualization. Great. We totally agree about this. We don't have any problem. But what will happen if one of your customers, he will come and tell you, sorry, according to our country regulations, as in Saudi Arabia, for example, NCA mandates for government sectors and CNI to have totally isolated and private network hosting model. When this means that I will not be able to be hosted on the public network across with the other users and multi-tenants. And this it will be violating the regulations. What you have to do, in this case, you have to provide the customer a stand-alone host, or in other words, if you are the security administrator and you know that in Saudi Arabia, you are not allowed to host your data outside Saudi Arabia and you have to host it inside the kingdom and it should be on a private network. Then you have to ask the cloud service provider or the local service provider to provide you stand-alone host. What is the stand-alone host here, my friends? The stand-alone hosts here, it is the physical server itself. This is the physical server itself. When you have a physical server dedicated for you, what will be the difference between your infrastructure and the other tenants' infrastructure? The other tenants' infrastructure, they will have a VM. For example, for yourself, you may have one host here, and this host, it will be assigned for you, only for you. No one is using this machine. But for the other customers, there is one host, and this host is split into multiple VMs, and these VMs are not allowed, are distributed across multiple customers. This is supported by multiple customers. When it is single host, it is single host because by the end of the day, it is a single server. This is a server. You are buying a server, but a huge server, and you are splitting this server into multiple VMs, this VM1, this VM2, VM3, and so on. And this means that by the end of the day, this server, it has a multi-tenants, and it is not hosting single user. It's hosting multiple users, although it is single host. But in our situation here, for the standalone host, this one, it can be hosted for single user when it's only one user which it can be used. It can be, for example, the normal user, or even this user, he will say, okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate, I want you to split it into 10 VMs. But by the end of the day, these 10 VMs are assigned to a single user. When by the end of the day, he is using this server on his own, and it's not shared with any other tenants. Of course, it will be very expensive. Compared with this solution, the standalone, it will be very expensive. But in some situation, as we mentioned, NCA, for example, in Saudi Arabia, they define that you are not allowed to host your data in a cloud service provider, except if it's local. In other words, it's hosted in Saudi Arabia, and to have a private model hosting. And of course, if you have a standalone host, this is considered as a private model hosting. Okay. You have to take in your consideration availability of clustered hosts. Of course, I will not go through this because I'm quite sure you are aware about it, that you have a cluster, and this cluster, this means that you will have one host here and you have another host, and in some situation you may have a third host and so on. And these are working together. These clusters can enable through Unix or Linux or Windows, or in some situation mentioned the application itself. Usually you will find one of them it's active and another one it's standby. When if the active one is down, then the other one it will take over and it will be reactive, and the users not feel any downtime or just a few milliseconds which the service it will not be available. Also, in some situation, they may have here load balancer. This load balancer, it will be able to load balance between multiple servers and so on. Then the clustering or multiple servers controlled by a load balancer. This is a concept. There are a lot of concepts which you can consider in designing your data center. There is another point which I want to highlight here, the maintenance mode. What is the maintenance mode? Maintenance mode, this it's usually in any data center, enterprise data center, you will find that every year they will develop a downtime period for the data center. For example, they will say, okay, the data center, it will be down on Saturday from 1 p.m. till 7 a.m. Why? Because, of course, you know that you require a lot of services for your hosting environment. You want to load patches, you want to update fixes, you want to install additional modules of software. When you need to down the services and make the maintenance. In a cloud service provider, we are not able to do this exercise because let's have an example. If I'm living in Saudi Arabia and I want to make a maintenance, I want to upload batches or services or whatever, and I know that the service it must be down, then I can say, okay, my friends, the maintenance mode, it will be on Saturday, 1 a.m. till 7 a.m. I'm quite sure that 99.9% of my users, I don't want to say 100%, but let's say 99.9%, they are sleeping and they will not feel that there is any downtime. Then I will be able to do my exercise. I can upload any batches, fixes, and everything. It will be great. And at 7 o'clock, everything, it will be up and running. Okay, great. But what will happen if I'm a cloud service provider? Can I do the same exercise? Of course not. Why? Just imagine you are hosting multiple servers, and these servers, multiple customers, and these customers, they may reside in a different data zones or time data zone. This, it may in GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, but the other one, he may be in another area which is plus 3 GMT as in Saudi Arabia, or it may be another one minus 4 GMT. Or it may be another customer who is plus 9 GMT and so on. When the time which is considered great and suitable for the GMT users for customer number one, of course, it will not be suitable at all for user number 4, and even for user number 2 as well, because as you can see, there is 3 hours, and this 3 hours downtime, again, this it will make degradation in the performance, availability, and the cloud service provider, he will not be able to fulfill the SLA. Then what he have to do? There is no way. He must load the services, he must load the patches, he must load the fixes, and the service must be down. Then when we will come to the concept of the cluster host, this it will be a great concept, and it will be very helpful for the maintenance mode. Because as we mentioned, we have 2 servers here. And these 2 servers, whatever the concept of the availability, even it's cluster or it's using a load balancer, or whatever, then I can down this server for some time. When the cluster, it will take this one up and running. A user will not feel any down. I can upload it, everything is running fine. Then I can take this up and take the other one later down, when upload and the fixes and all this stuff. Then this means that by the end of the day, there is one server or maybe more than one server, because of course, when you are speaking about an enterprise cloud service provider, we are not speaking about two servers. This is maybe 8, 10, 15, 20, and all of them are managed by a load balancer. Then you can down the server as you require. You can make your maintenance, and this it will be totally ready for the operating, uploading the batches, the fixes, and so on. Any questions?
No, that's that.
No, sir.
Okay, great. Now, the last point, availability of guest operating systems. Of course, guest operating systems, what do you mean by guest operating systems? You remember when we say we have one host here, and this host, it is distributed into multiple VMs. This may be VM 1, 2, 3, and so on. This it's called the guest operating host. When this means that you have an operating system load here. This it can be Linux, this it can be Unix, this it can be Windows, whatever. In VM, there is support something called VMHA. Then if there is any problem happened on your VM, it can create another VM and it can shift all the activities into the new VM. This VM, it can be on the same host or it can be on a different host. And by this way, you...
So what is the, excuse me, sir. So
Sure.
what is the meaning of HA? VM is virtual
High
machine. What is
availability.
HA?
VM,
Okay,
VM virtual machine, high availability.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your question. Now you are sure that it is up and running even if it's down for any reasons. Okay. The other module which we have to consider it, the physical and logical infrastructure for cloud environment, managing the physical and the logical. Of course, as we start from the beginning of the module, first of all, you have to design. You have to design. We designed the data center, we designed the physical environment, we designed the logical environment. Now we will speak about the managing. The beauty of this slide that it will not, or there will be no big difference between what we will speak here and what we spoke about, because it is almost the same. We will speak about the access control for remote access. I think you are aware about it. Remote access, this is a very important service because this is the service which provides the access for the users to the cloud service provider to access their applications and services. And we said that it's very important and it should be secure. It can be through powerful access controls. It can be through 2FA and so on. The OS baseline, compliance monitoring and remediation. Again, we spoke about these baselines, and the important point here, which I want to highlight, that if you create a baseline, it is very important to monitor this baseline. Just to create a baseline and install it or keep it resident on the servers or on your infrastructure to be used by your customers does not mean that your exercise it is done. Just I want to ask you a question. Just imagine if there is any hacker, and this hacker, it can be internal hacker, it can be disgruntled employee or internal malicious insiders or whatever. He was able to access this baseline and he create his own baseline and he add one of the services which it will be able to collect some information from the servers and send it to Rouge server or external server as for the hacker, information for the hacker. Then this will be a crisis. Then if you create a baseline, it does not mean that your exercise is done. You have to monitor this baseline. You have to install this baseline on a server. You have to make sure that it's based upon the design which you planned for, and it has all the necessary services, and there are no additional required services, and so on. Patch management, of course, is very important for those who are working in the security field, and we know very well that whatever any application or hardware or software or operating system or whatever any device it has, software or application, it has a bug. There is a bug. Usually, manufacturers they are discovering these bugs and they will prepare some fixes and patches, and you have to keep all these patches up to date to make sure that your devices are secure. Unfortunately, most of our security administrators, as we mentioned last session, we are afraid to upload these patches, and they are saying if my infrastructure is up and running, I don't want to have any changes because it may affect my operations, and this can represent a crisis for my organization and performance and business and so on. But as we mentioned before, it will be a good approach if you have three environment, one for the production, which the users and customers are using, and the other one for development. If you are develop your software, then you have to develop your applications on this infrastructure, or and to have another one for testing. When this testing, it will be a clone from the production, and you have to test whatever any batches, any applications, any security services, any security devices, whatever on this testing. And if it's everything, it's running fine, this will be great, and you can install it on the production without affecting your users' performance and business performance. The other issue, performance monitoring. This, as a cloud service provider, it's very important. You have to keep an eye on your performance to fulfill the service level agreement, to make sure that you have enough resources to serve your users. Because just imagine if your users are expecting that you are an enterprise cloud service provider, they have a marketing campaign, they may have discounts when they are expecting a lot of users, and they know that the servers, it will the current servers which they are hosting, it may not be enough to handle this traffic, and we know that they may require automatically provisioning of maybe double the number of the servers. Then if these servers are not available or the resources are not available, then there will be a problem against the cloud service provider, and this, it can be a violation for the service level agreement between the cloud service provider and the customer. Hardware monitoring, again, hardware monitoring is very important. I highly recommend to have an infrastructure which it will be able to monitor the hardware and the virtual machines as well. And if you are able to have a third party, of course, most of the manufacturers, they have their own hardware monitoring. Then, for example, if you are buying your servers from Dell, from HP, from Asus, from whatever, any location, Huawei, they have their own hardware monitoring devices. But unfortunately, these devices will be only dedicated for their devices. And this, it will not make sense, because as a cloud service provider today, you have servers from Huawei, tomorrow you may have servers from HP, day after tomorrow you may have servers from other manufacturers, because this, it will save some money and it will increase your profit. Then it's highly recommended to have a third-party application which it will be able to monitor the hardware, VMs, and if you are able to monitor the software performance as well, this, it will be better. This, it will be great, because all the monitoring information, it will be hosted by single screen. You can create dashboards out of these screens for management, for operations, for service desk, and so on. Backup and restore function. You must keep a backup for all your data. And of course, for the cloud service provider, it does not make sense that you keep a backup on backup tape, for example, or even hard disks. Why? Do you think that if one server is down or a data center is down and you want to fail over the services to another data center in another country, you have to tell your customer, okay, my customer, I am really sorry, your production data center is down and you have to wait 6 hours till we are able to recover or restore the data into the other data center. This means that you will be out of business within less than a year. Then what we have to do here, we backup and restore. It will not be a normal backup and restore. For cloud service provider, it will be the data replication. That the data, it will be replicated from one data center to another. The backup and restore concept, it will be for you as a cloud service provider, cloud service customer. If you are a cloud service customer, you can have a backup and restore function for your data center. For example, you may have the data center which is hosted in if you have a data center and you want to have a backup for your data, you can utilize the data, the cloud service provider as a backup where you can replicate all the data. And this data, it will be a good option to be replicated into cloud service provider when you will be able to get all the information required later if your data center is down. The backup and restore here depends, it has a different view from cloud service provider and the cloud service customer. Cloud service provider, we have to provide the replication of the data across multiple data centers, and the cloud service customer, we can utilize the backup and recovery for the data within the cloud service provider infrastructure. The security, network security controls, we discovered all these settings, but anyway, I think we can go through it very quickly. Okay. The other factor for the managing the physical and logical infrastructure for the cloud environment is the network security controls. Of course, network security controls, these are the most popular controls known, although in the controls we have multiple controls. It may be administrative, it can be management, it can be technical, it can be physical. But usually when we are saying the security controls, most of the people, we think about the firewalls, IPS, VPN, and so on. The firewalls, I think they are the basic components of the protection for the network security. They are allowing the traffic or disallow the traffic based on the IP addresses and the ports of the service. Currently, we have some firewalls, which is called next generation firewalls. It's not only a firewall, it's a firewall plus IPS, plus antivirus, anti-malware, when all these services are running together. And this means that all the packets which it will pass through the firewall, it will go to be checked on all the layers starting from layer 2 till layer 7. The IDS, intrusion detection systems, and IPS, intrusion prevention systems. These are the devices which are installed on the on the networks, and the traffic, it can check the traffic and it can inspect the traffic. In the IDS, it will be connected to one of the ports of the switches or whatever, and the switches, it will capture all the traffic passing through the backbone of this switch, and it will send it to the IDS to analyze the traffic, and where is any attack, it will send alarm to the administrator. In some situation, it can interact with a firewall or a router or any other device, then it can stop the traffic. But as you heard now, first packet for the attack, it will happen, because When we captured the traffic, we sent it to IDS, it found the attack, and immediately it will raise a red flag. When the administrator, he can take an action. Then this means that we have one packet passed. If in the old time, if we attack, it consists of multiple actions and activities, and then it requires multiple packets. Then this, it will be a good method to isolate or to stop the attack. But when you attacks, it can be only one packet. One packet, it can represent the attack. When this means that this method, it will not be the outstanding solution for protecting against the attacks, because the attack has already happened. Then what it will happen, it will protect the network from recurrent of this attack again. The IPS, intrusion prevention system, it's something different. It has the same concept, but it's not connected to one of the port of the switches, and the switch, it will copy all the traffic to the IDS. It's in parallel, in line. What do we mean by in line? We mean that we have the IPS, it's reside here. With the IPS, it's reside here. When there is traffic coming here, and it will be checked. When if it's legitimate, it will allow. If it's not legitimate, it will be stopped. In the ITS, the situation, it's different. The IDS here, this is a switch. You have a switch here. You have the ITS, it's connected here. And you have here the other ports of the switch. When whatever any traffic it's coming to these ports, the switch, it will take a copy of this traffic, and it will send it to the ITS through this port. Okay, then the difference between the ITS and IPS, that this it's not in line, it's offline, and as we mentioned that first attack, it will happen, but this one, it's inline, and it has the possibility and the feature that it can stop the traffic, it can drop the traffic, it can log the traffic, and so on. Okay, this we covered firewalls, IDS, IPS. The whole network IDS, it is exactly the same as the IDS, but it is installed on the network. This installed on the network. Host IPS, it is a host IPS. It is host IDS. It's not the concept of the IDS as we mentioned, where it is connected to a switch or a network, but it's a software. It's a piece of software which it will be installed on the servers, and it will make some anomaly detection. In other words, it will be able to compare the server traffic with some signatures. It will be able to check the behavior of the server itself. The server, if it's an email server, then you have to configure that it's email server, then understand it's email server, then it will, if it will find some activities which it's not related to the email, for example, TFTP, or maybe some backdoors which is trying to collect data and send it to the hacker, then it will be able to send an alarm to the administrator to stop these actions. Okay, the honeypots. Honeypots, these are vector machines. The honeypots are vector machines because usually what is going on? Suppose that you have here, this is your network, and you have here, for example, 3 servers, and these 3 servers are published over the internet. Then if there is any hacker, he will come from outside. What he will do? First of all, he will do something called reconnaissance. Reconnaissance. What is the reconnaissance? First of all, he will check the IP addresses. What are the servers which are live? And he will discover the IP addresses of the different services. When different servers. Then he will start to scan the ports or open ports on each server. When he will find some open ports, for example, port 25, it's open, port 23, it's open, port 110, it's open. These are protocols and these are services. This it will be the POP3, this it will be SMTP, this it will be Telnet, and so on. When he knows that there is a server here and its IP address so and so, and it has these protocols, then he will be able to maybe utilize these protocols or these open ports and initiate some attacks. What we are doing, usually when we have a honeypot, this, it will be one server here, and this, it will have, for example, SMTP as port 25, or email, in sending email, or maybe a website as port 80, or whatever, any of the services which have well-known ports and what are the hackers usually looking for. And it has nothing, it has no data, it has no data. But when the hacker, he will try to scan, I will not put these servers here at all. I will keep these servers in internal network. Then I will remove it from here and I will put here the servers here, and this, for example, it consider as a DMZ or whatever. Then if there is any hacker, he will come and he'll try to do the reconnaissance. We have the software which it will be able to discover the IP address of the server, of the hacker, and what are his the protocols which is using, and what are the ports which is searching for. Then we can collect all this information and configure all these servers to be protected against these informations and these backdoors which are providing the hackers with the access. The vulnerability assessment, the assessment is usually we are software tools. We are running on the network, and it will check for vulnerabilities in devices and software, operating systems, applications. It depends upon the vulnerability software which you use it. There are a lot of vulnerability scanners in the market, some of them for operating systems, some others for hardware, some others from third party. It can be able to do the whole exercise, and also they are able to make vulnerability management, because if it find any vulnerability, then it will be able to recommend what the fixes it should be downloaded from the internet. And finally, the network security groups, and this, it will be some groups over the internet, and this, it will be very important to have subscription in these groups to be updated with the latest attacks and the security information. Management plan, if you can, sorry, not plan, it should be plain. With the device which, not device, it is the software approach, software base, which it will allow you to access all the services from the cloud service provider. Even if you want to create or provision new servers or update resources or administrate the network and so on. The other module, the managed security operations, of course, it's very important to speak here about the security operations centers. In other words, we call it SOC. The SOC. SOC, it is the security operations centers. They are a security team who are responsible for managing events and incidents. Events and incidents. Event, it's identified occurrence. There is any action happened on the network, and it raises an event to tell you that there is something wrong. If this event, it will affect the security, confidentiality, integrity, and the availability of the assets, then it will be considered as an incident. In this case, the security operations center, we have to take care about this instance. We have to report these incidents and start to work on it. We have to find out the reasons, the root cause analysis for these incidents, and we have to propose the security controls and solutions to fail over the service. And usually the problem management process, it will come in the picture to discover what is the cause of the problem and why it happened, and it will provide some controls when this problem, it will never happen again. Monitoring of security controls, this is a very important issue because, you know, security controls, if it's not properly configured, and it's doing its objectives, then this it will be considered as a vulnerability. It will represent a vulnerability in your network. And usually you have to monitor the security control, you have to check if it's doing its objectives which are implemented for, and the effectiveness and efficiency of these security controls, and if it's able to do the exercise as it's mentioned. The SIM and log management, I think we discussed this a lot before, and we covered it in more details when we said that this is a centralized device or a server, and it will be able to collect the data and logs from different devices, from hardware, software, applications, servers, operating systems, and so on. And there will be some correlation policies and codes where it can analyze the data and discover any attacks and send the prepare reports and send the information or alerts to the security administrators. I think we finalized the training course. This was the last module in our training course. Thank you very much for attending this course, and this is the time for any questions if you have.
First of all, I would like to say that